You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
I wake up in the morning and I feeling a vibe. Give thanks to the Father, I'm breathing alive.
Culture and Flavor is a podcast about food and culture centered in Black and Indigenous foodways, hosted by myself, Zella Palmer, right here in New Orleans, Louisiana. Each episode features high vibrational conversations with cultural bearers, chefs, farmers, scholars, barbecue pit masters, and more. Where there is flavor, there is history. Join me on Culture and Flavor and all of my guests as we share stories that will have you praise dancing, cooking, conjuring, and inspiring your culinary journey. Welcome to another episode of Culture and Flavor with your host, Zella Palmer. So for my listeners, one thing you need to know about me is that I love Louisiana Black Creole culture. Growing up in Chicago, my mom's hairstylist, Susan's mom, was from Lafayette, Louisiana. And because of her, I fell in love with Zydeco music at a young age. Every time Susan or her mom would play Zydeco and they would dance around the salon shouting Etwa, they brought the warmth to cold, dreary Chicago days. Fast forward in 2019, I wrote an article for 64 parishes about Creole trail rides and the history of Black Creole cowboys in Louisiana. I even filmed a short documentary on YouTube with my students documenting the Simeon annual trail ride in Sulphur, Louisiana. So when I met Gabrielle Deculus, I was thrilled to see Southwest Louisiana Zydeco culture finally showing up in a major way in New Orleans with her brainchild, NOLA Zydeco Festival. Sadly, there's a disconnect between New Orleans and the rest of Louisiana, yet so many have family from both regions. So for this episode, we're going to delve into Creole culture in Southwest Louisiana with social entrepreneur, business boss lady, who is responsible for so many epic events and the planning of it in the city of New Orleans, from the Super Bowl to Beyoncé's Renaissance tour. So welcome, Gabrielle. Welcome to Culture and Flavor.
Thank you, Zella. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for that introduction.
Absolutely. So let's start with, the age-old question that's always asked. Define Creole for our audience, please.
Let's talk about culture in the aspect of lifestyle. That's what culture is, right? The Creole lifestyle is very family-centered. The Creole lifestyle is unapologetically outside and enjoying, the outdoors and not feeling like they need to be in the mix of city life. I think a lot of Creoles love both, but we love rural Louisiana. I think that Creole culture, of course, and lifestyle has to do with how we cook and what we eat seasonally, because we all know that Catholicism has also played a part in Creole culture. Although not all Creoles are Catholic, there is a very strong connection there, which is another loaded topic. And then, of course, we have the music, the stories that we share, the words that we use in Creole language and Corivini and other forms of Louisiana Creole languages. It's a plethora of things that are very unique about about Creole culture, and it reaches beyond Creole people. I think the cool thing about Creole culture is that it shows up, everywhere, not just within Louisiana, but I think all over the United States. You see it with the food and all of that. So, yeah, Creole culture is a beautiful thing, and it's a lifestyle.
So many Native Louisianians, some of them carry deep trauma with the legacy of the idea of Creole identity as it pertains to colorism. So what are your thoughts about that?
This is also a really great loaded question, because I think that there is some very real experiences that people had with folks who identify as Creole and they're lighter complected. and elitism and other things have come into play. But as a brown woman myself that is Creole and identifies also as Black, it's definitely interesting. Like it for a while personally, impacted some ideas of how I thought of myself. Um, and then I think that I had like an awakening and realized that for example, my great grandfather is a pioneer of Zydeco music, and he was a brown skinned man, and colorism is wrong. A lot of people have had experiences with it, and it's made an impact on everybody. I think that it's important to realize that just because you've had a bad experience or you have an idea of Creoles are um, preferably light skin, and those are the preferred people of all Creole people, that's 1,000%, you know, wrong, false, and a lot of us do not live that way anymore. But it is a part of the history.
So, Creoles and Cajuns, I can't count the many times that tourists have come to just New Orleans alone and said, "Oh, I want some Cajun food. Where's the Cajun culture?" So, what is the difference between Creole and Cajun for my listeners?
Yeah, so Cajuns, um, they have a connection to Canada that I would say most Creole people don't genetically. And so, getting into, the genetic piece of the people who created Creole culture, the people who created Cajun culture. Um, there's, obviously they're European, obviously they have occupied certain areas of Louisiana and coined certain things based off their connection to Canada. On the Creole side, it's a bit more diverse in regards to, your ethnic background. You have African American, you have African that's there, you have Spanish that's there, you have French that's there, Native American and Native indigenous folks who were here, in the 1700s, 1800s, who were connecting with these groups of people. Um, that's considered Creole. And then all the flavors and lifestyle-esque things that we've adopted along the way, that has become what Creole culture is, which is most identified with Black culture and Black influence, right? Um, on the Cajun side, they have some very unique things, but for example, um, I want to say that they don't use the scrub board in their music because of the frequency that sends. They don't cook with certain ingredients. You don't really see Cajun dishes with okra, which is my favorite. Um, that's more of an African influence, right? And so, you know, I would also like to say that there is a very strong and important connection in between the two communities. Um, some people confuse the two, and some people claim both of them, right? Because you can come from a Cajun environment and be Creole. It's real crazy over here in Creole.
Your roots in Zydeco culture run deep. As you mentioned, your great grandfather. What are some of your early memories of just, realizing that you are Creole and that you grew up in this rich musical legacy?
Yeah, so the first few years of my life, I was in Hawaii because my dad was in the military. And whenever we came back home, once he got out, I realized, I remember some of those realizations around like people wanting me to pick. Like, are you Black, you white, you mixed? Like, what are you? So I started to realize probably around second grade, third grade, around language, because I am Black, but my skin is, I feel like whenever I was in Hawaii before, we didn't have a conversation about am I Black or am I white. It was just, our family's from Louisiana. Here's your aunt, here's your grandmother, you're Creole. But anyway, the kids made me choose. The public made me think about, my identity. And so I'd say that happened as early as like third grade. And then I realized that we would go and visit my grandparents on the weekends, and that was a totally different lifestyle than living in Baton Rouge. So, once we moved to Baton Rouge, being, an hour or so, hour and a half away from Eunice and Mamu, I started to realize like, oh, we're not from Hawaii. we're not from we're not from Baton Rouge. This is where we're really from. And that looked like my grandfather's garden with okra and cucumber. That looked like the hog that they were feeding throughout the year for the big family gathering. That looked like, my grandmother being the seamstress and the caterer for the whole community, bakes the pies for everybody. That's when I really started to really understand a bit more about who we are, where we're from, what we value, growing up in the Black Catholic Church. So I'd say probably around the ages of 10 to 13 is when I really started to understand who we are and what it means to be Creole.
There's always been this push for assimilation with both Creole and Cajun culture to assimilate into American culture, especially after the Louisiana Purchase. And so many Creoles and Cajuns have said, how their grandfathers were pushed not to speak the language anymore and just were, discriminated against. And I remember recently seeing a clip of Jordan Thibodeau, a well known Cajun artist. And
Mm-hmm.
he said recently on a 60 Minutes interview that too many times American society pushes those cultures that are different to become what he called a generic human. He said, either you live your culture or you kill your culture. There is no in between. What are your thoughts about Creole culture today? Is it vanishing or is there a renaissance happening?
Yeah, so I do think that we are on a rise in regards to being seen. I mean, you look at what people are talking about on social media and in the news, and just some of these realities we're seeing our global music folks and religious folks, being connected to what we have been trying to protect here, which is, the unique Louisiana Creole culture. I think Beyonce has brought a lot of attention to not directly Louisiana Creole culture, not super direct, but she's brought a lot of attention to her mother's story.
Mhm.
Her mom just put out a book, where she's talking about who she is, where she's from. You know, um, I think that we are being more seen now. We are a small population. There's lots of Creole groups, but there's nothing like the Louisiana Creole group. And so I think that we're on a rise, and I understand what Jordan meant by that. I think Jordan is great. I know Jordan, and it's either you can look at it you can word it. Language is important. I think you could be hurting it or you could be helping it, and that's one of the things that I'm focused on through my work, because I feel like I'm a part of multiple cultures.
Mhm.
And Louisiana Creole culture, although being like my default, um, I'm definitely proud of where we're going, and I'm happy to contribute to it in the ways that I can too.
You mentioned social media, and you are very active on social media as it pertains to marketing NOLA Zydeco Festival. And I've also seen just a surgence in Black cowboys telling their story. And you see, people dancing with the fans and things of that nature and line dancing. And that is a first for many who aren't familiar with Louisiana culture and Texan culture.
Mhm.
But even still, the history behind it isn't often told. It's very local, I think, in my estimation. And you hear songs back in the day where they would talk about a Creole woman or mystique of this and mystique of that. Um, but what are your thoughts on just how should influencers who are from Louisiana, who are native to Creole culture, how should they share their stories on social media?
I think we have to, number one, be willing to be, open and vulnerable. And just like any culture, like there's some things that you try, may not be comfortable to share. Um, and I think that, regardless of that fear, like you just have to do it. One thing that we are doing on our end is, making sure we always have cameras around at our events, that we interview these artists, that we help them, create content, because a lot of them are just living life. They don't have, um, a social media or a professional or a videographer resources for that. Um, so it's important to just understand that who you are is valuable and your story matters, and you got to figure out how to share it in the ways that you can. We
Mhm.
we're working on our stuff too, and I'm sure maybe you've seen Footwork by Drake LeBlanc. We work with him a lot,
Mhm.
which is a beautiful cowboy abstract film that documents the experiences of Black Creole cowboys throughout their lives. So, like, you just got to tell your story, whatever pertains to you. Like, you have to do your part. So,
Yo, I love trail rides. Anytime there's a trail ride and I have an opportunity to go, I am there. I remember taking a group of my students, to a trail ride in Opelousas. And some of the footage, I've shared online, and, it's nothing like it. And for some of my students who aren't familiar with, rural Louisiana culture, because so much focus is oftentimes focused on New Orleans culture, but the rest of Louisiana is left out, and the entire state
yeah,
is rich with culture. I
yeah,
think, just the culture in general is sexy. It's family, it's
yeah.
heritage, it's grounded in the land. It's in, what's your last name, who are your people. It's so much to it that I think Gabrielle is doing an amazing job with just bringing it to the masses and still protecting it, so that it doesn't get exploited. So sometimes our culture, or spaces or venues never return for many reasons. Slim's Waikiki was the dewdrop in of Zydeco music. The dewdrop in, we have previous guest Curtis, who talked about this in that we have in New Orleans, where Ray Charles, all the legends played. But at the same time, there was Slim's Waikiki.
Yeah.
And I would love for you just to talk about well, first of all, the history of Slim's Waikiki, and how do we in the 21st century honor legacy when doors close on spaces that created generations?
Oh man, so Slim's Waikiki, I went a couple of times before it closed. And it's a legendary place. It's owned by the Gradney family, who I'm connected to in many ways. And it was at least it was founded by them. I'm not sure who owns it today, because it is coming back, and they got funding, I believe, within the last year, and
Mm.
they're working on bringing it back. Now, will it be a dance hall? I'm not sure. It may just be a Hall of Fame type of space where you can have special events, but I would definitely encourage folks to look into Slim's Waikiki, especially if they're looking for a day trip to go visit a really amazing music venue. This is where my aunts, my grandparents, my cousins, many generations before me, this is where they would go to enjoy Zydeco music and dance all night. There's another um, historic dance hall that's now closed, which is Richard's Club, which is just right outside of Lawtell, I believe, or in Lawtell. The lines in between these little towns pull up on you quick. But, I would really like to see another Zydeco Black Creole owned Zydeco dance hall um, come about, because I think we may have one at this point in the state.
Girl, maybe that'll be you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we have lots of goals, so we'll see.
So tell me about some of your favorite trail ride memories. And for our audience who aren't familiar with trail rides, can you just kind of, I touched on it a little bit, but I would love for you to explain just, what they are to rural Louisiana?
Yeah, so trail rides are a way for you to get together with your friends, your family, the community. It may be a public event. It may just be a small group that decides to, get the horses, get the trailers, get the trucks, get the hay, and let's just go on a ride and, maybe go through certain areas, see family, stop, grab something to eat or talk and get back on the horse and in those trailers to just enjoy the day. It's like imagine, a picnic or a fun outing with your favorite drinks and people and conversation. Outside through the country.
Hmm. So, what are some of your favorite memories of going to the trail rides?
Yeah. So some of the trail rides are like overnight, multi-day. But every once in a while you'll just get a special event. So my most recent memory actually of a trail ride was for Mardi Gras this year. We were in Swallow with my cousin um, Rachel Cesar Martinez, who is an equestrian veterinarian.
Mm.
So her and being one of the younger ones on her side of the family, the younger generation, she wants to keep that tradition going. So they had a trail ride from Mardi Gras in Swallow, Louisiana. And I got all my peeps together, and we all went out there. We stayed at Cushada, and we had our own trail ride. On multiple different vehicles and just stopping and then chasing the chicken, which is very unique to, I want to say, more so Cajun culture. So that's what I meant earlier about how this is, we're very close related and even overlap, of course. But yeah, so it was recently for Mardi Gras. We were chasing the chicken. Like they had food, they had drinks, they had a dance, they had a couple of Zydeco bands at the end. Alphonse Ardouin performed. That was a proper trail ride, you know. And then I would say my earliest is going to Piney Woods Trail Ride, which I don't believe they do anymore. That's also in the area, but this is when people come out with their RVs. They got their cast iron pots. They got their grills out. They're cooking for everybody. You have bands, you have horses, you have a trail that's likely through the woods and back to the campsite. So it's a lot of fun.
It is. It is. So, and you recently, I think, received an award as an ambassador. Could you just, talk a little bit about that?
Oh my goodness, that was such a like pat on the back for me. I really have been working hard along with my cousin Courtney since about 2019 on all this Zydeco work. And there's an organization called Creole Inc. They're based out of Lafayette. They actually created the official Creole flag, and I believe they've been around since maybe the early 80s. They have an awards ceremony they do every year, and they work with different folks in the Zydeco industry to do nominations. So it was a really awesome acknowledgement for me, as someone's been working really hard on these different programs and projects around Creole culture and Zydeco since 2019. It was a very nice pat on the back from that organization who we hold in high regard in regards to preserving Creole history, Louisiana Creole history, culture. Like that's our organization. And so to be seen and nominated and voted for and winning, uh, I'm not gonna lie, it felt really good. Uh,
I'm so proud of you. So,
and
so proud of you.
sometimes you need that. You need a little pat on the back, and I appreciate it from them. You know.
Yeah, yeah. So, we're gonna take a break in a few minutes. So we're gonna play a little snippet of your Zydeco album for NOLA Zydeco Fest last year, 2024. I would love for you to talk about some of the artists that are featured on this album and why they are so important to Zydeco culture right now.
Absolutely. So we work really hard to curate a diverse, range of age and style of musicians for the Zydeco Fest. And in 2024, we were able to finally get it right and have the full set recorded. And we went in and we selected a few songs from the artist. The artist that we have featured on this album is Corey Broussard, is Wayne Singleton, is Dwayne Dupsey, Rusty McTwire, and Alphonse Ardwin. And so you are getting a variety of them live at NOLA Zydeco Fest. They are so important to the culture, and we're so very happy that we could co-produce this, with them. And we plan on doing it every year, because we got to document, what's happening now and continue to preserve our culture. So enjoy. It's available on all platforms.
So enjoy, y'all. I'm gonna say what they say here. Et toi.
Yeah, you're right.
So we'll play a few snippets and then we'll be back after a few messages from our advertisers. And we're going to delve into NOLA Zydeco Festival a little bit more and the food of Southwest Louisiana. Thanks, y'all, for listening. Make sure you subscribe.
I got to be the cockatoo by two. Waiting on me. She said you better hurry home, cause I gotta be to work for 3. I got a store I used to Texas, but I finished trying to live in a car. But I can throw my speakers in the trailer and be there for 2 on the dime. I got to be the country show. I got to be the country show. That gave me 35 minutes to do what I gotta do. Send her up to work and I go to sleep to know. Got the show by show.
This episode is brought to you by Plugra European-style butter, crafted for those who demand precision and exceptional results in the kitchen. With 82% butter fat and a slow churn process, Plugra gives you flakier crusts, fluffier cakes, and rich, melt-in-your-mouth pastries. Because great baking starts with great butter. Unlike standard American butters, which have only 80% butter fat, Plugra ensures the ideal moisture and fat balance so your recipes turn out just right every time. That's why professional chefs trust Plugra and home bakers love it. Plugra's slow churn process creates a smooth, creamy butter that gives dough a soft, pliable texture, making rolling, folding, and laminating effortless. Whether you're perfecting a buttery pie crust or layering a delicate croissant, Plugra helps you bake with confidence. Experience the difference for yourself. Find Plugra in stores near you or visit plugra.com. That's Plugra.com.
Okay, we're back. So festivals are not easy to operate, especially in New Orleans, and being as a woman-led business and sometimes a male egocentric industry isn't for the weak. So tell us about NOLA Zydeco Festival and just, some of the lessons you've learned along the way and where you're headed next for 2025 or 2026. It'll be 2026 for the next one, correct?
Well, the next one is November 1st, 2025. And I believe for 2026, we're looking at October 31st.
Wonderful. Tell us a little bit about, just planning and running an operation like the NOLA Zydeco Festival, because we are a city of festivals. There's a festival for everything, fried chicken, everything. And then you came up with the idea of, let me bring my culture to New Orleans. What are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way? And what are some of the takeaway stories that really keeps pushing you forward?
For sure. So The New Orleans Zydeco Festival was founded by myself and my cousin, Courtney Smith, who's also a great granddaughter of Boisek Ardwin. Her and I had both really just been in New Orleans for a couple of years. Whenever we had a conversation one day after visiting Rouse's, is that, we hear our family's music in spaces like the grocery store and certain restaurants, but we don't see enough of them. And so what we decided to do is, it really, Courtney pushed me because, I'm already in marketing and productions and I have clients and I have work to do. And I'm usually not just trying to add more work, right? Especially not a whole festival, but I'm happy Courtney pushed it and we were able to jump into this world and apply, everything that we've been doing for others for ourselves. This is important for representation and equity within the cultural realm. Because, there's certain names that people know here in New Orleans, like the Dukesy family. But there's so many more that need, representation. And so whenever we decided to do this, we knew that we would have obstacles. We knew that, it's expensive. We knew that we would really have to go in 1,000%. And I think that because we decided to do this the year after COVID is when we started. So 2021 was the first year. There were a lot of incentives to get people back to Louisiana, and so I'm so grateful for my marketing mind because I went in, search mode and contact mode and, find out where is the money for cultural events, especially the ones that, for the cultures that we're trying to preserve here or that we are preserving here. And so shout out to the Louisiana State Tourism and NOTCF, the New Orleans Tourism and Cultural Fund, because both of them saw the vision and they have been investing in us every year since we started, and I believe that, there's a lot more funding to do to keep this going as we go into year 5, lessons around staffing, lessons around, running a stage, lessons around community relations when it comes to vendors and, training them up, like first year, we kind of let them do what they wanted to do to an extent. But, then as a social entrepreneur, I'm thinking about how can we make sure they have the absolute best outcomes working with us. So we started training them. I mean, it's so many things that has happened in the last, 6-ish years of getting this up off the ground. And we're getting better and better. Last year we had 10,000 people there, and the challenges are going to keep coming, but we're ready for them.
I know that's right. And what was cool about last year was, that you added a genealogy component. And when I think about genealogy, I mean, we take it seriously here in Louisiana. We go in those archives and we find your people. And when
Yeah.
and recently, in an hour, historic New Orleans collection, archivists and genealogists found the Pope Leo's, ancestry. And, and the rest of the world was shocked. But if you live in Louisiana, we're not shocked at all, because they will find your people.
Yeah.
So, talk about how you're going to add continue to add the genealogy components to NOLA Zydeco Festival.
Absolutely. We work with one of my cousins. One of my cousins, listen, your cousin extension is real, okay? So my cousin Alex, of Alex Genealogy, Alex DePauli is his name. He's a genealogist that we partnered with along with a brilliant group of genealogists and researchers. And they're called the SWLGR. We worked with them last year and we did a couple of really cool things. They had a tent with they create these really beautiful boards that break down family trees and make connections between through surnames. Okay, and they had a nonstop line all day. People with questions. people who wanted to reconnect with them afterwards, wanted them to do special presentations because they do that as well for Creole families. I mean, the interest was high, and everyone on both sides were happy, that it was present. So we're going to keep on doing that. The other thing we did this year, we did our very first walking museum where we featured all of the Zydeco artists on a poster that I designed, where it listed all the Creole names they are connected to. So, although my last name is Deculus, I'm also an Ardouin, I'm also an Esprit, a Victorian, a Fruget. I'm still all of those other surnames too, right? And so we wanted people to see themselves connected to the culture and to these artists. And most of the artists, we're like, can I keep one of these? Because we had them printed, we had double prints, but when you cross the bridge over at the previous location, we had it displayed there like a museum, and we also had it throughout the event once you got in there. So anyway, they wanted to take their posters home, and of course I let them take it home, and a lot of them have it hanging up in their shops, in their barns, and so they're very proud. And enjoyed the work that we did last year. We're going to keep on doing those two specific things every year moving forward.
So, and there was a documentary. It was called T. Gallup, a Louisiana Horse Story by Kanye Castile, and she made the case that cowboys, the first cowboys, were Black and were from Louisiana. And she talked about how these Creole cowboys managed thousands of cattle in pre-Louisiana Purchase days and led cattle drives to keep New Orleans fed. And when I think about, just visiting, when I was filming my documentary about trail rides, and I had the chance to kind of just go up to different folks at see me in trail ride. And, one thing I loved to see was how proud they were of, the region that they were in, and how proud they were of their food. And of course, there's always this like, oh, y'all New Orleans folks don't know how to cook like us. We cook better. Right? And, I wish more people would experience the rest of Louisiana, because I love going to Laura's too in Lafayette. That's one of my favorite restaurants in the region. I love some boudin from Billy's Boudin. I love the stewed okra, sauce piquant, boudin. There's so many dishes. And I love to see Gerald Grunek, a local foodie celebrity who shares with the world all the good eats of Acadiana, Southwest Louisiana. And so I would love for you just to talk about some of the dishes that are indigenous and, special to Southwest Louisiana.
Yes. So my favorite is okra. I'm such an okra girl. I advocate for okra. I would go to my grandmother's house. If she knew I was coming in, she would cook smothered okra and chicken for me with rice. And I'll just be like, oh, in heaven. Okay. So yeah, there's your okra dishes. There's sauce pecan actually, I believe, is more Cajun because of the tomato that's in there. But on the Creole side, which I love sauce pecan, okay, just to be clear. But on the other side, it's gravies, where there's still it's like a sauce pecan, but it's more of a gravy in the sense that there's no tomato. It's not a tomato gravy. My grandfather and my dad now, but my grandfather LJ, who's now deceased, he introduced the turtle sauce to me at a very young age. And so that was always a delicacy and a treat to enjoy. We really enjoyed turtle sauce pecan. So, there's gumbo, there's etouffees, which I do like to cook an etouffee myself. Even like shrimp and corn bisque. I really enjoy a nice bisque too. So, and then crawfish, I was thinking about getting some crawfish today, after this interview.
That sounds like a plan.
So anyway, those are some of my favorites. I also love pickled okra, and I like
Mm,
spicy pickles. Sometimes with my food, I am a potato salad scoop in the bowl type of girl.
me too.
Yes. So those are some of my faves. And the cool thing too is that we can infuse Creole flavors into almost anything. And so I like to cook a lot of different things, but it's highly likely nowadays I'm gonna pull out that Uncle Lux seasoning, which is very delicious. I need to bring you a can.
Yes, please, please, please. And you mentioned gravy. I believe the Southwest Louisiana are rice and gravy folks. I mean, obviously because rice culture goes so deep in Louisiana, and cattle herding. I mean, all of this dates back to the Senegambian period when a lot of Senegambians were enslaved and brought to Louisiana because they had these skills to cultivate rice, to herd cattle. But that rice and gravy, I mean, the gravy, and I remember the first time I went to Laura's too, and I had her rice and gravy. My eyes rolled back in my head. I have never had gravy like that in my life before. And even eating the smothered okra, it took me back to, my childhood when my cousins who are, their father is Nigerian and eating, Nigerian food. And it really, the flavor profile is so layered and complex, and the time that's taken into it, and for anyone, for me, who says they don't like okra, y'all haven't been to Louisiana. I'm sorry, you haven't, you know, because it's a game changer.
Yeah, they try to assign okra to the characteristics that you get based off how you cook it. So, some people don't like the slime or whatever, but I wanted to mention that, I come from a farming family. My dad's family formed rice and soybeans, for generations in Mamou, Louisiana. And yes, we don't play about the rice. And then on the off seasons, that's whenever they would fill the ponds with water and the crawfish would be caught. And so it's the circle of Creole life is rice, soybeans, and crawfish
Mm.
and okra. And
So
okra.
in November, y'all, you will see me at the festival with my boots on, and I would love, I would love for you just to talk about the fashion, because if you've all never been to a trail ride or a festival like what Gabriella's and her cousin are doing, it is a sea of beautiful people of all hues and shades, families together, and the music, the Zydeco music is pumping, and the stage is on fire. And the fashion is, I think, another component that, I would love for you to just talk about, because it is very unique. And I love to see women just looking so beautiful in their cowboy boots, their jeans, men looking good with their hats on and their boots and their, the belt buckles. I mean, it is beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. So, Zydeco, the frequency, the energy is like, come have a good time. And because we are in Louisiana and we are country, I don't care what New Orleanians say, y'all country too. Because we are country, it's not so hard for us to grab, some pressed for the guys. They throw on their pressed jeans and their button downs and hats and belts and nice boots. And for the women, it's not out the norm to see them in a flirty skirt, dress, shorts, jeans, whatever you feel like wearing because of our crazy weather here. But, with your fly boots, your hats, your jewelry, it's really country chic.
Mm,
It's well groomed country people.
mhm.
Um, and we welcome everybody to come out and express themselves. people wear their cute shirts, graphic shirts that say different things, that rep their culture. It's really a beautiful day.
It is. And, I think also the horse culture behind it. When I went to a trail ride in Appaloosa, and just seeing the younger generation embrace the culture is profound. And then the tricks that they do on these horses. I mean, standing up on horses while it's, galloping along, women, flicking, over a horse and doing all kinds of tricks. I mean, it's wild to see, that I love it. And it just reminds you of how deep and long the history of Creole culture is in Louisiana, and that at the foundation of that were Black cowboys and Black cowgirls.
We're fearless people. Like, let's not forget that part. Like, these communities went through a lot. A lot of folks, came from scratch, came from nothing, or they were immigrants or whatever all these generations ago. And, we are, I hate to use the word resilient, but I would just love to emphasize that, we're ambitious, we're proud, we are creative, and, just willing to make things happen. I just saw something the other day. They were talking about how kids that don't have a chance or opportunity to bump their head and figure things out, that the kid can go one way or the other as an adult. And I'd say that we bump our heads a lot in Creole culture, and people, we love you, but we know you're going to figure it out.
And we're going to end on that note. And we're going to listen for a little bit more to some of, Gabrielle's Zydeco album, just to end this beautiful episode. And we can't wait to just keep on sharing more culture, more flavor, on Culture and Flavor with your host, Zella Palmer. And thank you so much, Gabrielle, for all that you do.
Thank you, Zella. Thank you for having me.
It's on. Are you done with it, Corey? Yeah. That's it for you. Let's go. We gotta play some music. Let's go. All the way from Louisiana. Yeah, you know what time it is. Call the shot. It's I said, oh, bye-bye. Oh, bye-bye. When I leave, don't ask why. You said some things I don't like. You did some things I don't like. When I leave, can't say goodbye.
I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling a vibe. Give thanks to the Father, I'm breathing alive.
Culture and Flavor is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org.